We should listen to James because he knows what genuine faith looks like. Because that's going to be one of the main themes in the book of James. What does it look like to actually have faith? The reason why James knows is because he was there in Acts chapter 8 when the church in Jerusalem was persecuted and everybody had to disperse. He has witnessed Jews, including himself, who have been persecuted, lost their property, and became refugees all over the Roman Empire. So he knows how costly it is to follow his brother. He knows what you will have to go through if you're going to follow his brother. He knows that how hard life can be in persecution. Because he's not sitting on this ivory tower. He went through the persecution himself in Acts chapter 8. In fact, the author of Hebrews is talking to the Jewish believers from Acts chapter 8 who were going through so much persecution that they were tempted to go back to Judaism because they're saying, you know what? If following Jesus is going to mean I lose my property, I might die, I see my siblings getting killed, my family's getting killed, all this stuff, let's just go back to the way it was before Jesus. Let's just go back to the Mosaic Law. And what's the book of Hebrews all about? Jesus is better, right? Jesus is better. Don't go to the law. Jesus is better. Don't go to Moses. Jesus is better. Don't go to the angel. Jesus is better. Why is the author of Hebrews going like this? Because he's talking to the same audience as James. These are people who are thinking about giving up on the faith. Because persecution is that bad. That's how bad it was for them. So when we read the book of James, you have to sympathize with the audience here. Because James is going to be very forward. But he's not speaking to a bunch of comfortable, wealthy Christians in America. That's not who he's speaking to. He's speaking to people who are literally at rock bottom in their life. Everything they work towards, their status is gone. Their Jewish community is gone because anyone who followed Jesus got excommunicated, ex-synagogue. We see this in the Gospel of John. The Pharisees pressured the blind man's parents by saying, did Jesus really heal this blind man? And remember, what did John say in parentheses? Because the parents knew if anyone confessed Jesus as God, as Messiah, what happened? You got kicked out of the synagogue. There's only one synagogue per town. That was your community life. So the parents were so afraid of losing everything, they threw their son under the bus. Just ask him. We don't want to say it, right? But this was happening to James and everyone else. They've been ex-synagogued. They've been kicked out. Now they can't even live in Jerusalem because of persecution. And he knew what genuine faith looked like because he lived during the time of persecution. And the opening part of James' letter highlights this theme of trials. And James says, after everything he's gone through in his life, count it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials. That's his perspective. It's a good thing that I went through trials. It's a good thing that you go through trials. Why? Because trials are the way that your faith gets tested and grows. If I were to ask you a bunch of hypotheticals, I'm sure hypothetically we think, yeah, in that situation I would do this, but how do you know unless you've actually been in it, right? Like I see this all the time in other areas of life where people are witnessing something from a distance and they, like those videos that go viral and they see somebody, like all these bystanders who are just standing there watching some old lady get attacked and they're like, if I was there, I would have never let that happen. It's like, but how do you know you would have done that? You don't know until you've actually been there. Oh, if a gun was to my head, I'll never deny Jesus. How do you know that? I'm sure Peter was very confident saying he will never deny Jesus. And then what happened? You see, you don't know where you really are in your faith unless you actually go through trials. How do you know that you would choose Jesus over money until money is offered to you? How do you know that you would choose Jesus over your kids unless you have to actually sacrifice your kids like Abraham did, right? How do you know? Conceptually, it's not reality. You like to think, but just like when you took that math test, you thought you were going to ace it, and then what? You got that F or whatever, right? Tests are good because they tell you reality, not your perception. And trials are the tests of your faith, according to James. That's why James actually says it's a good thing when a believer goes through trials. Count it joy, because this is the testing of your faith. When Acts chapter 8 happens in your life and persecution comes and you have to run away from everything that you knew and you're comfortable with, that's a good thing, because now you know exactly where you are in your faith. Are you really going to keep following Jesus when things are going bad? Or are you only going to follow him the way James did before Jesus' resurrection? As long as he does miracles and makes me popular, I'll follow my brother. Do you see that? James has seen both sides of the story. He used to follow Jesus for all the benefits he can get. Now he's following Jesus even though he lost everything in the process. And he's saying it's a good thing he went through that because going through that trials confirmed to him where he really stood in his faith. And that's the same way with us. You see, I think one reason why you should study this book is not just to understand the arguments James is going through. You have to understand who he is as the author. He's not speaking conceptually. He's speaking through experience. And there's something more powerful when someone speaks through experience than concepts, right? Would you rather learn business for someone who knows all the principles of business or someone who's actually done it over and over and over again? In the same way, how do you want to learn how to be mature and godly? Hear from somebody who's actually been through it. The way one theologian said is that every godly person in this world is going to walk with a limp, like Jacob. There isn't a single godly person who hasn't suffered and gone through trials. And if you haven't gone through trials, you're not godly, you're not mature yet. Because that is, by definition, by James, the only process of growth. It's like saying, I'm super fit, but I never stepped into a gym in my life. What are you talking about, right? I never ran up. Like, it's the same way. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a good Christian, I'm mature, but I never suffered. That's not possible then. Right? It's like your kids. My kids who complain, I'm like, oh, you don't even know what to complain about yet, right? You have no idea how hard life is. And it's like, oh man, I don't want a Nintendo Switch. Everyone got it last year. Why can't I get this year? Life is unfair. Right? And it's like, right? You want to. Until you realize that was me, right? And I'm sure someone who's more mature looks back at the things I complain, is like, what, Andrew, you're worried about that? Wait till life gets harder, right? Wait till trials actually come. But here's what James understood. His nickname, by the way, was James the Just. That was his nickname in church history because he was such a righteous person. He went through so much trials. Because let's think about the trials. Even before he became a follower of Jesus, Jesus and his family didn't live a charmed and nice life. You guys know that? They were very poor. Jesus and Mary offered turtle doves, according to Luke chapter 2, when they went to the temple. That was the prescription for the poorest people who can't afford sheep. Mary and Joseph were very, very poor. In fact, Jesus even says during his ministry, the Son of Man doesn't even have a place to lay down his head, and you're asking about all the costs to follow me. Whoever looks back and doesn't want to follow me, they're not worthy to follow me, right? James was part of the household. He grew up poor. So it wasn't like he was living this rabbinical life like the rabbis who were rich during this time. He went through a lot of poverty. His older brother was irritating him all the time because he was perfect, speaking crazy talk that he's God. I'm sure people were murmuring about his mom all the time. Oh yeah, Mary got pregnant by God, and he heard that. You can imagine all the trauma James has gone through. And then he witnessed his brother, who he had all this hope in, to maybe take him out of poverty, gets crucified as a criminal. But after he's gone through that trial and more trials in Acts chapter 8, he was known as just, righteous, because he knows what it's like to go through life.